Tally-ho, you there.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Snowman is an animated series about Ross and his friends as they're taking wacky hijinks across ice glaze.
There's a playlist of all the episodes in the description, and I recommend watching episode 8 before continuing this video. Not for context or anything, but mostly because I want views. After 2 years, however, the series was cancelled, unfortunately. I told everyone I would make an in-depth video about someone's journey as well as what led to the show's cancellation. This is that video. So, without further ado, let's slide on into this. You see, it's a pun because ice.
Well, Paco, it all started a while back.
I first had the idea of snowmen back in 7th grade, where I drew a lot of concept art for it. And while I show this concept art, I want to share a big secret about snowmen. The snowman you know and love was going to be an RPG. Yeah, you heard me. See these areas? You're going to explore them. See these enemies? You're going to fight them. You know Yanni, Pete, Jerry, Henry? They don't exist at all in this version. You know Paco, the mumbling moronic smog? He was going to be the main villain. The main villain, man. He was going to have a pro ship. It was going to be the big final boss. And you know who'd embark on this perilous journey with you? Good question. Feast your eyes on prototype Laurel and a pterodactyl. A pterodactyl with Chubb's personality fighting alongside you. Yeah, forget vultures. I'm gonna play with my pet dinosaur and beat people up. This version of snowmen is so wildly different from the show that I don't even think they share a name. But I don't remember the name, so we can just call this version Snowmen the Game. Snowmen the Game would have been similar to a Mario and Luigi game. Enemies would be rocking around the map, and the battle would start if you ran into one. Battles would play out like any other RPG, except your enemy's attacks can be dodged if you know how. If you get hit, you lose HP. Lose all your HP, and you die. I tended to take heavy inspiration from stuff I liked back then, and this was most likely an example. The plot was basically, Paco goes to some islands and does villain stuff. Find him while stopping the fiendish stuff that he does. It wasn't very deep. However, despite the flaws in general mediocrity, I respect this as Snowman's roots. Just the idea of a Snowman RPG is charming to me, due in part to my nostalgia for the Mario and Luigi franchise, and it's fun to think about. Sadly, there isn't much tangible content to show for this, so I can't really go further into details. So with that, we move on to...
Okay, so I need critique on this new plotline for this novel I'm writing.
I'll make this quick. The story is about a girl who gets her magical paintbrush stolen, gets framed by the thief, and must get her paintbrush back with the help of prototype Ross. Chapter 1 had a big dairy theme, with gigantic milk and yogurt cartons, as well as other dairy products scattered around. I presume the paintbrush had something to do with that, but I don't know. And I'm sure I would know if I actually had the novel. I have mental images of what certain things looked like and a basic idea of the story, but that's it. And I didn't even write past chapter 1, so there's not really much reason to talk about this. And with that, we can finally discuss the Snowmen Show.
Ah yes, just one more thing. Jerry?
The Snowmen Show, otherwise known as Snowmen, started production on February 11th, 2020. If you've seen my video on episode 1 script, you would remember that I didn't even read from it when I recorded the audio. Episode 1 was also animated in a month and didn't introduce characters like Yanni, Laurel, Nikki, and Chubb. It didn't even establish most of the setting, but we'll talk about lazy writing later. Just know, the first 6 episodes were very quick to produce, only taking a couple months each due to low standards.
Hey Ross, would you mind turning me on?
Episode 2 is when I finally gained a brain cell and started reading from the script as I recorded my lines. I also introduced the other important characters. Except for Pete, and Henry, and Antonio. An important thing to note is the voice actors I was trying to recruit. Finding voice actors consisted of promoting the Snowman Discord server anywhere I could, If there is self-promo, I was there. Oh, how annoying I was back then. This is how I found potential voice actors that weren't my friends. From there, I would give them a list of characters and have them audition to play one of them. That sounds pretty simple, because it is. But most people who auditioned didn't end up staying. And for the most part, I didn't fire them because they were not up to the high standard. They would either lose interest or quit for some personal reason. One of them even got hacked and I blocked them. But what's important was that I gathered all the voice actors I needed, and the show went on.
Was a good morning, and I want to look like y'all in.
Episode 3 is the first episode to be edited by my friend, CatPalGirl2, who would be the editor until 2022. Other than that, production was pretty standard. This is probably the best episode until Alpine Idiots, though, so at least I can say the show is improving.
Oh, I'm evil now, okay.
I'd say the show's art style started to get better with episode 4. This is also the first episode where Chubb finally gets his voice actor, meaning the voice quartet is finally complete. At this point, Jerry in the Power of Hate is also a thing, which is cool. But this episode is also the epitome of Paco is misunderstood and no one likes him, which is less cool, because it's overdramatic and it makes me recoil. Aside from that, production went normally. While we're here though, I want to bring up the minisodes.
Come here, you rascal. Get into my grasp now.
They were just filler. They really weren't worth the time. It has the most deleted content. That's due to the editor forgetting to include a scene, me not reminding them to include the scene, and one of the voice actors not doing their lines. This is also the only episode where Ross doesn't talk. So, if you hate Ross and wish he never spoke again, this episode might be for you. Episode 6 is when Antonio Lethargo gets introduced. It took 6 episodes to introduce the mayor of the show's main setting. Now that's writing.
It's because you're so annoying. You're so like.
The first episodes took a month or 2 each to complete. This one took half a year. At this point, I was getting better at making stuff, and I started to have higher standards for my projects. That, coupled with personal stuff, made this episode take much longer to make. But it doesn't stop there. Editing also took a month to finish, and there was another instance of a voice actor not doing their lines. Granted, this isn't the same person, and they thankfully ended up doing them eventually, but this just complicated workflow even more, and it's only going to get worse from here. Episode 8. The episode that took a year to release. The episode I didn't even finish before releasing. The episode that marks this show's grave. Work started out pretty normal. I had a script, voice actors, and my usual readiness to get going. And for the next month, I worked. I completed a couple scenes and things were looking fine. However, I had 2 voice actors who didn't do their lines yet. This meant I had to slow down for them before doing a good chunk of the scenes. And for the rest of 2021, I did. Yeah. If you remember anything Keel Jenkins related about 2021, it's probably A12PTOT. If you don't know what that acronym means, watch the video on the screen. If you do know, you might also know that this took 8 months to finish. On the one hand, this did give the voice actors enough time to record lines. On the other hand, I didn't work on episode 8 at all for 8 months straight. And when I came back, I was not as proud of the episode as I could have been. Regardless, I picked up the pace after finishing A12PTOT, and actually finished a few more scenes. But as the months went by, scenes were harder and harder to make. My standards were much higher than before, especially since this was around when Snowman's story would take a more serious turn. This also meant I couldn't work on other projects, because Snowman was taking up so much time. and eventually I grew weary of the show. In July of 2022, Snowman was officially canceled. Things changed, and I wasn't getting what I used to from making the episodes. You may be wondering what I had planned before Snowman's End, and I wish I could tell you.
Guess who's gonna dance over your grave?
Boo! Your planning stinks.
Okay, fair. I did have a plan though. Initially. Then I changed it. Then I changed it again. Then I changed it again. And again. And again. And again.
Boo! Your redundancy stinks.
Snowman was planned to have 2 seasons. Maybe more if I wanted some episodic seasons afterwards, but that wasn't final. For a while, I wanted to end the second season with a movie. This is where the hate storyline would have ended, and I even intended to kill off a couple characters. The rough plot is on screen now. I'm not reading it though, because this video is going to be long enough as is. I eventually decided against doing the movie, but I still wanted to end the hate plot line by the end of season 2. And I mean, if I can kill off a couple characters at the end there as well, you know what? I remember wanting to have Ross gaining color be an important detail going forward. I wanted Ross's inky silhouette to become its own entity and to seek revenge on Ross, but this was early on, and I quickly scrapped it. And while on the topic of antagonists, how about Antonio? He was likely going to stay a villain for all of season 1, but fall from power early into season 2. I was thinking about having him lose his third eye in the season 1 finale, which would make him much weaker. This would lead to the townspeople kicking him from office, or perhaps they would have formed a militia against hate, which they would eventually use to kick Antonio out. Whichever way I chose, Antonio wasn't going to stay the mayor. From there, I might have had Paco and Nikki run the town, or maybe have them make a robot to run things. I was also thinking of an episode where Antonio tries to get back in power with the help of Jerry and Henry, where they ultimately fail. But most of that wasn't for certain. I always had new, better ideas for what to do with the show, and I never committed to anything. Who's to say what I would have done with any given character? Maybe Chubb would get annoyed with Ross's bossy attitude and stop being his friend. Maybe he'd become friends with Yanni and Jet instead. Maybe Yanni would break up with Laurel in the season 1 finale. Maybe Laurel would grow as a person after her potential breakup, become less rude, less tough, mellow out a little. Maybe she'd even reconcile with Pete, the person she used to call Dad. Maybe Paco and Nikki would study the world around them, as well as hate, becoming more well-known and liked by the townsfolk. Maybe they'd even hypnotize the whole island to keep them from being infected. Maybe Ross would die in the season 1 finale, be reincarnated as a human vulture mutant, and desperately try to get back into society but never succeed. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because the show's canceled.
That's all, folks!
Snowman was not a good show. Mediocre writing and poor planning were consistent factors. Tonally, the show went from episodic comedy to plot-driven and serious out of nowhere. And at the end of the day, I lost interest. I wasn't getting anything from the series that I couldn't get from simply creating a better series. And creating a better series is what I intend to do. It's called K&C, and it's a reboot of those Keel and Cloud shorts from 2020. I won't spoil anything yet, in case I haven't released the first episode yet, but it's gonna be much better than Snowman. First off, I have a more thought-through plan for the series that I don't plan to change too much. Also, it's just gonna have better writing and animation in general. I'm actually really excited for this series because it is going to be delight in the sky. With all that said, you probably expect me to hate Snowman looking back at it. You're probably expecting me to regret its existence, wish it never happened, and try to forget it. And you'd be wrong. Snowman is such a cornerstone in this channel's history, and it was such a learning experience. Sure, it's bad. But once I'm a professional in the animation industry, I can point to Snowman and say that that was my first. I can compare then to now and say that I improved so much. And that's not something I can say for most of my creative work. That, coupled with the history behind it, is what makes Snowman so special to me. So, thanks for watching.
Snowman is really cool. Snowman is really cool. Snowman is really cool. And it is a thing that I made. Snowman is really cool. Snowman is super rad. Snowman is super cool. But it's actually kind of bad. But we still love it.